I called my counsellor Catherine, and I'll never forget this. She says, Joe, you play football. Here's the thing. You walk onto the field of play and the only performance you can control is your own. Okay? You've got 11 other variables in terms of the opposition team. You can't control them. They could be the drink, the drugs, societal issues, problems. You have the referee, who's representative of the government, and you can't control him or influence him. Then you've got your own players. So you have 10 other players. And you can motivate and inspire them, or you can bring them down. Your performance can influence others in a positive way to beat the opposition. But sometimes you can't control the end result.
Welcome to Golf Yourself Healthy, the community of golfers who are unified in their belief that golf is good for you. I'm your host, Kris Lynch. Join me and invited guests as we share stories around how golf is helping us to live happy, healthy, and fulfilled lives. If you'd like to join our community, why not follow us on your podcast platform of choice and be notified of new episodes as soon as they're released. Please also check out our back catalogue of previous podcast episodes and journal articles at golfyourselfhealthy.com. This week, we welcome Joe Donnelly, Chief Executive Officer of TAMHI, to the show. TAMHI, which stands for Tackling Awareness of Mental Health Issues, is a Northern Ireland-based charity which leverages the power of sport as an enabler of raising awareness and encouraging conversations about emotional well-being. Under Joe's leadership, TAMHI have received widespread acclaim and various awards for their work, most recently winning the Sport Gives Back Social Impact Award earlier this year. As you will hear in this episode, Joe's why for doing what he does is inspired by trauma, tragedy, and loss. Joe openly and vulnerably shares about how he dealt with losing both his friend Thomas and his stepfather Seamus to suicide in 2009 and 2014 respectively. What I personally find especially inspiring about Joe as a person, and indeed the work that he and TAMHI are doing together, is that through tragedy he has learned to channel his focus and energies into being of service to others. More than that, he is, as he likes to say, changing, shaping, and saving lives through the power of golf. Without any further ado, let's tee off and jump into the conversation. I think a good place to go to now and really to sort of properly tee off, as I like to say in these podcast conversations, is for you to tell us, my listeners, a bit more about you personally to start off with, and then maybe lead into talking about TAMHI and the organisation itself and why it exists, what it stands for.
Yep. Well, my name's Joseph Donnelly. I'm the manager of Tackling Awareness of Mental Health Issues, TAMHI. On a personal level, I started this organisation in 2011. My friend Thomas, behind me here, Tucker, he died by suicide in 2009. We started a football programme working with 2 football clubs in 2011, and then we're now in 236 groups across the UK and Ireland providing mental health resources. Locally, we deliver a lot of initiatives around sort of mental health through training, through a programme we call Mental Wealth Games, which teaches mental health and emotional well-being using sport as a tool on the field, in the hall, on the golf course, not necessarily in a classroom. And I, on a sort of a professional level, I deliver the Irish Football Association's Ahead of the Game programme. I helped co-design it back in 2017, and I'm one of the lead tutors that delivers it across the country on a regular basis. We're an award-winning organisation. We won Sport Gives Back, presented by Lampard in London in February 2024. But on a personal level, like I said, I'm a father. I've got 3 children. I'm a football coach for Football for All, with young people with autism. That's my son has autism. And I just am passionate about using the power of sport for mental health and emotional well-being. I used to work for Sport Northern Ireland as a sort of a grants development officer. That was sort of what my field was. But when I lost Thomas, I started TAMHI as a voluntary project, and it just spiraled from 2 clubs to over 200. And like I said, I've realised firsthand that the reason why I've chose sport as my sort of sort of forte to promote mental health and emotional well-being. It's an environment where people go of their own free will. So if you go to sport of your own free will, you're more receptive to the learning and the messages around mental health than you are at being subjected to it in an environment you don't necessarily want to be in. So the vast majority of people focus their mental health energy on schools, which is great. But the reason why they do that is because they're guaranteed huge numbers. So I could walk in and say I've worked with 30,000 people, which sounds like loads, but basically I could do 30 assemblies with 1,000 people in each assembly, and all of a sudden the value of that is irrelevant. Where when we work with clubs, we work with coaches and grassroots leaders who have a connection with the young people or the players, women, men, that they serve, that people listen to them, people respect them. There's an affiliation with the badge, there's an affiliation with the club. And if we educate those guys to work with our players, it's a more meaningful engagement around mental health and emotional well-being.
I mean, just as you say that, Joe, I'm already starting to I'm getting a feeling inside about just what you probably get out of delivering to more compact size groups, which, like you say, like at a headline level, it's great that certain organizations might try and sort of cover all the bases. And yes, they're covering at scale, but actually, I guess at a very human level, I imagine, given what you've just said about the impact of sport to the individual and how they're more willing to engage, and then ultimately B, the kind of impact that you're seeing firsthand, I imagine, is pretty powerful. Can we speak, and if I can ask you, and if you could talk about Thomas in as much detail as you feel comfortable doing, because I appreciate that, given that what you've told me there about him, that's obviously a very tragic set of circumstances, and I'm sorry that he's no longer with us, and I'm sorry that you lost him, Joe. But it sounds to me like Thomas is your why, or a big part of your why for doing what you do today, because the organisation's essentially named after him, right?
I'm best friends with Thomas's cousin Tiernan, who we and him went to school together from primary one, and Thomas's brother Stephen. And Thomas would have regularly played sort of poker with us once a month on a Friday. We always went down to Stephen's, Thomas's house, had a game of poker, had a good relationship with him, and we were all at a christening on a Sunday. And I'll never forget going into the work, and it was a bit worse for wear because we were out sort of at my friend's christening, and I got the phone call from Tiernan, who is my best friend, Thomas's cousin first, crying his eyeballs out, saying that Thomas had died, he'd ended his life. And I started to cry, and my manager picked up straight away what's wrong. Joe brought me out to the side, and I just couldn't comprehend that we were all together on the Sunday, and on the Monday that had happened. Then I got the phone call straight after from the brother, Tammy, Joe, did you hear? And he was not crying, he was like shocked. And I was like, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to react to this. I can't comprehend what you're going through. My manager, again, drove me home because I got a bus that day in the work. He drove me back to the house, and I went straight down to the family's house to see what I could do. The one thing I'll always found was you feel that you're trying to be useful, but you're from the outside looking in. You're just trying to be a supportive friend, a supportive sort of structure and stability during sort of what is only described as sort of one of the hardest times in anybody's life. And I had this myth that suicide was something that only happened to people who listened to Marilyn Manson and wore black makeup, and like, it was goths and stuff. And that was a complete sort of misconception from myself. Now, this is 2009. I was a bit younger and a bit naiver, but it never happened to anybody that we knew. It never happened in our community. It was just something that was just suicide was a outside thing. And what I realised after it was there was loads of my friends and loads of people that I knew that were struggling, that were keeping things bottled up, that had never comprehended suicide or never sort of thought about it. But whenever it happened, it all of a sudden got them to open up and say, look, I've been going through stuff, but I've never thought about that. And then all of a sudden people started to reach out and ask for a bit of help and support. And I was going, that's how TAMHI started. So between 2009 and 2011, I started to sort of volunteer for an organisation called Lighthouse, which was a mental health charity, and we were just giving information out at mental health events and programs and football events that we run. And then in 2011, I hosted a memorial tournament in memory of one of my friends who had died by suicide and four young people from my area who had died by accidental overdoses. So they never intended to end their life. They just took drugs and choked on their own vomit. That was sort of what happened to all four of them. And the Tucker and Titch Cup, TT Cup, was designed, and the amount of football teams from the local area that were coming to me saying, Joe, I've got this player struggling with addiction, I've got one struggling with drugs, I've got one struggling with relationship breakdown. And I was just talking, listening, caring, and saying, posting. And all of a sudden, someone said to me, Joe, look, think about a project, think about how you can build on this. You're doing really good work. But so I started a project working with two teams to go, well, how do we make mental health better connect? And the way we did it was we took general mental health information, which is a stigma associated to, and we stuck their club logo on it and made it in their club colours. And all of a sudden, it created an affiliation. And if you think about when you play football or you play for a club, you play for the badge. Even in a golf society or a golf club, the badge on the uniform means something to you. And that's how we created affiliation. And it started to just like blow up. It went from 2 clubs to a project called Change Makers of 8 clubs. And what we were finding was more people were talking, more people were asking for help, more people were accessing services, and sort of I started to get a sort of a bit of a profile in the mental health field at a local level. Then in 2014, my stepfather ended his life, and it was probably one of the most surreal experiences of my life because I was no longer in the outside looking in. I was in the inside itself, and what happened with it was he was in my life for 16 years. Prior to that, my mum had been subjected to a lot of domestic violence, and Shamey, who was my stepfather, was the only person post a guy called Jim who never subjected my mum to domestic violence. Because when I was 14, I stood up against it, and it ended up. Um, but this guy was amazing. He was a lovely fella. He lost his biological son in a fight in the town, and from it he just went off the rails. And I'm in the office because my office ended up being Lighthouse, the mental health charity I was volunteering for. They hosted me. I had went full time in April 2014 after successfully delivering a number of initiatives with an evidence base to show that I was tackling stigma and promoting positive mental health. And I was on top of the world in April 2014 going, look, this is now my new career. I'm driven and motivated. I'm going to do more good because I've got a sort of a history of sort of success behind me. And in October 2014, I was in the office and I got the message, or got a phone call from my mum saying she got a message saying, the car's in the Cave Hill, I love you. And it was from Seamus, who had texted her. Now I rushed round, got my mum, even got a speeding ticket, just drove like an absolute demon to the Cave Hill to try and find him. And found the car, and I went left, sorry, right towards Napoleon's Nose, which is sort of, if you're from North Belfast, it's the main route. He had gone an obscure way left, and I was up, I was shouting the name, I was trying to find him. In my heart of my hearts, I knew sort of something's wrong here, this isn't good. And the next thing, the police came up and had to almost sort of drag me off the Cave Hill because visibility was becoming extremely poor because of the mist. And when I got down to the house, within 20 minutes, we got a knock on the door saying a body had been found. And again, it was surreal. And here's the thing. Sorry. Whenever that happened, my friends were quick to come back and support me, who I had supported during that difficult time. Now, I went in the sort of man of the house mode because I hadn't been the man in the house in a long time because Seamus was the man of the house. So trying to sort funerals, trying to sort arrangements, trying to sort teas, coffees, all the silly things that you try and you need to sort just things. And because my mum was just void and numb and bits, and my brother my brother was actually alright. My brother was very strong with it, and he was a great help. And my sister again was a complete mess. But I did what I needed to do to get sort of to the funeral stage, this like support people. But my friends were there for me. So, so things like getting the gazebo. I always remember I got the gazebo when Thomas died. The guys rocked up. There's a gazebo for the front of the house, you know, for when people come in case it's raining, and they came with sandwiches and food and stuff like that. Now, after Seamus died, I wanted to give up Tommy because I just started working full time in mental health, and I just failed, fundamentally failed because Seamus had died. And I remember Joe Murphy, who was the manager of Lighthouse at the time. I was going into the office and literally sitting like this in front of a screen and minimal to no engagement. Wasn't reading my emails. Was just like there in front of a screen going, "What do I do here? How can I advocate for mental health and emotional well-being when I failed?" Fundamentally, I was motivated and inspired by loss. My job is to stop that happening. And then whenever I sort of lost my own stepfather, I'm like, this is game over. But Joe Murphy, who was the manager of Lighthouse at the time, picked up on this relatively quick, hit me a slap in the head, right? Which I needed, but not in an assault type of way, but in a friendly sort of, right,
Yeah.
come you here, get yourself in and speak. They specialised in bereavement. And again, I went in, and for 2 weeks, I didn't talk much. I didn't disclose anything. I sort of kept things bottled up. And then I called my counsellor, Catherine, and I'll never forget this. She says, "Joe, you play football. Eh, Here's the thing. You walk onto the field of play, and the only performance you can control is your own. Okay? You've got 11 other variables in terms of the opposition team. You can't control them. They could be the drink, the drugs, societal issues, problems. You have the referee, who's representative of the government, and you can't control him or influence him. Then you've got your own players. So you have 10 other players, and you can motivate and inspire them, or you can bring them down. Your performance can influence others in a positive way to beat the opposition, but sometimes you can't control the end result because she asked me a question. The trigger for Seamus was losing his biological son. Did you throw the punch that caused his biological son to die? No. Then it's not your fault. And she started to talk to me about sort of, I know I've talked to you, Kris, before, but if you lose someone like you love, and this is your son, what way would you feel? And control the controllables. There's nothing I could do about that, but what I can do is I can go out every single week and try and perform, try to motivate, try to inspire, try to bring my other 10 players with me, try and get them to sort of beat the opposition. You're not going to win every game. You need to be realistic. But if you're always driven, if you're always motivated, if you're always inspired to shape change and save lives, which we can evidence that we have done, then you're going to win more games than you lose. But never blame yourself for not trying because, like I says, my big thing was I went right. If I had went left, I might have got him. He says you can't control it. He says, but what you can control is get up, get out, act positive was the biggest thing that ever came. Not be positive. Okay, be positive. Like, yay, everything's awesome. But act positive is despite you're going through challenges, despite going through hard times, get up, get out, try your hardest, motivate yourself, inspire yourself, try and help, act positive. The more you act positive, positive things will happen, which will make you smile, which will make you be positive. But sometimes you got to act positive when you're rock bottom. Sometimes you've got to just accept this is the way it is. Reframe life was a term that came. Never forget. You never get over it, but you need to reframe life and almost build forward. But how can you always look back, always remember but always move forward, always drive forward, always be sort of focused on making a positive difference. And that's what happened with my bereavement counselling. And it clicked on me that I'm going out every day to try and help one person. And if I do help one person, I've made a positive difference. Now, we know we've helped significantly more than that. But if you just basically have your focus insular on the fact that by acting positive, by our mental health programs, our training programs, the conversations that we have, the young people that we work with, the teams that we work with, the change makers, the coaches, the leaders of clubs who serve so many people, if we can get those guys looking out for each other and creating a culture where we're all shoulder to shoulder, side by side, looking out for each other, helping each other, supporting each other, knowing how to have the conversation, knowing how to basically signpost and connect someone, you're going to remove a lot of sort of guilt, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of stigma, and that's ultimately how we make a difference. And it's all, the term that they use here is lived experience. I've had so much lived experience, it's unbelievable. But because of the support that I've had from friends, from support services, my lived experience isn't channeled out in negativity or trying to bring people down. It's using my lived experience to try and motivate and bring people up.
Yeah. Joe, there are two things I'm going to say to you now. One is thank you for sharing what you've just done, for being as vulnerable as you have been, because that is what I want this podcast to be all about. And secondly, I'm going to say I will make a commitment, if you join me in that commitment, and just is to not say sorry. When you said it a couple of times there as you were getting emotional, I do it all the time. And I just think what you've just done is inspiring to me. It's going to be inspiring to a lot of other men out there, especially, to just show the emotion that you did. So I think it's wonderful. And I wanted to ask you something. I don't know if you're aware about Grayson Murray, the professional golfer on the PGA Tour who recently took his own life. And I have really sort of hummed and hawed quite a bit about whether or not I would kind of reference him on my podcast. And I want to hear with you. And I want to do that because I believe that you're someone that, given your own life experiences and what you do with TAMHI, you've got, for want of a better expression, because I can't think of a better one at the moment, you've kind of got skin in the game, right? So what I would say about Grayson Murray is that he inspired me a few years ago when he first came out and said, I'm struggling. I'm struggling with my mental health. I'm struggling with alcoholism. And both of those things I could relate to on a very personal level. And when I see someone like him or someone like you step forward, be vulnerable, that is where inspiration happens. And I'm struggling here to hold it together too. And so when he died, that really genuinely hit me, because I thought, what was going on in that guy's brain? When he decided that was the answer. And it made me think. I observed how multiple of his peers, professional golfers, men, who, some of whom have been vulnerable about their own struggles in the past, but others who, from my observation, these are guys who I've never at any other time before heard communicate with that level of empathy. And what I'm going at here, Joe, is it really strikes me how when things like this happen, it's only then do people react and turn around and say, and they start coming out with what I consider sort of platitudes, if I'm honest, which is like, be kinder to each other and say nice things to each other and check in on the people you love and stuff. And that's all great. I advocate that 100%. But what I feel needs to happen more is that needs to be constant. That needs to be always. And it just isn't, for whatever reason. And I guess my question to you is, based on the work that you do and where you see examples of this happening, what do you believe it needs to take in order that we almost develop a culture where these kind of conversations happen every day and on the regular, and it becomes second nature?
Well, I'll give an opinion, on the sort of the Grace and Murray, because I don't think, in the context of the vast majority of people, Chris, sadly, our clubs are reactive, and that's across all sports. Now, in clubs within sort of typically the most depraved areas of Northern Ireland, England, Scotland, Wales, suicide is quite high. It pertains to the social issues around sort of poverty, and all the evidence in the world suggests that that is a thing. But clubs, particularly men's clubs, have a lot of stigma associated with mental health and emotional well-being and keeping things bottled up and not talking about it. And when something does happen, it is an outcry of empathy and I wish I had a knew, I shoulda, woulda, coulda, if I had spotted the signs. And it's too late. But the vast majority of the reason for that is because the leadership isn't strong enough around mental health and emotional well-being, and that's from the top. They do a lot of programs around education, but they're not compulsory. So I believe strongly that one of the fundamental things in golf as a governing body is safeguarding is compulsory. Okay. The chances of you being subjected to a safeguarding incident, which is serious, and we're talking about the abuse and stuff like that, is not high. But the chances of you being subjected to a mental health issue within your club is a 1 in 8 for a young person. These are Northern Ireland statistics. I think it may be 1 in 6 UK, and a 1 in 5, 1 in 4 for an adult. You will, every single club will have mental health issues. Now, the thing about golf is golf typically, historically, has always been perceived as a prestigious sport. And I think with that prestige, where there is money, where there is wealth, where there's not poverty, I think it has created sort of an element where the stigma has almost sort of allowed itself to manifest, where you don't want to be saying you're a multi-millionaire golf player and you've got issues, because people automatically assume that money is basically power and money makes a difference, but it doesn't. People who are play golf or football or soccer, people from the most depraved areas and the sort of most affluent areas, mental health does not discriminate. And I think the guys at the top of the golf pyramid need to realise that mental health can be a huge issue within their clubs. Even something as simple as being able to afford to play the sport, being able to afford to take part. The amount of time and effort and investment that goes into becoming a professional player is a huge thing. And the other one is if golf was to take a step back and realise that from a grassroots level, the fundamental difference it already makes around mental health and emotional well-being. Golf is a champion of mental health and emotional well-being. It facilitates so much positive energy around sort of getting people active, getting them outdoors, teaching them new things, creating connection. And if they take that as their fundamental building block, they can increase their memberships. They can put more programs in place to educate about this is a club that welcomes mental health and emotional well-being. I know we had talked about the Golfing Society and the sort of golf as active agent hubs. How amazing is that initiative? And for me, that is a symbol of the type of initiative and program that can really fundamentally make a difference to communities, and how you take a type of program where you're working with older men who've lived experience, who've been through so much sort of potential hardship, and their stories will motivate and inspire. The way you talked about Grayson when he opened up earlier about his problems, they are the high profile ones. But the guys in the clubs who are going through their own challenges, have their own circumstances, have their own sort of stories. There are the things at a local level. We talk about sort of why I work with clubs. If we can get the guys in the clubs talking to their members, it's the thing which will motivate and inspire. It's the thing will change mindsets. Because with all due respect to the high profile golfers, they're elite. They're part of the 0.01%. But the vast majority of golf clubs have 99% of people that just play for recreational fun. They play competitions. They will never go to any sort of higher level, but they will be subjected to challenges. They may have financial difficulties. A lot of them may be businessmen where their businesses have been adversely affected by the sort of circumstances of an unstable economy. And if we create a culture where there's no fear and stigma, the likes of those healthy aging hubs and initiatives that we run, where we use golf as a tool for education, that would go a long way to the getting golf to not only make a difference to the people that they already serve, their membership, but to grow their membership, to grow the game of golf, to celebrate its impact
Yeah.
beyond swinging a club and trying to get your handicap down.
Yeah.
Celebrate the impact of golf as a tool to promote positive mental health, emotional well-being, and
Yeah.
the development of relationships, which ultimately, when things, I talked about my example, when things go bad, having those relationships in place will basically help you get through the other side. And I think just golf needs to embrace better education, proactive awareness, the exploration of initiatives which will develop the infrastructure within golf to be more supportive to mental health and emotional well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to, because in a moment I'd like to lead us into just talking a bit more then about how at TAMHI you're using golf as this power for good. But before that, I just wanted to sort of almost kind of respond to what you said there about you are right. I mean, Grayson Murray, as an example, he's in that 0.01% club of the elite. I guess I think there's a couple of reasons why I personally could, whether it's relate is the right word or why his example inspired me so much. I think one is for example, I look to some of our elite sports people as kind of like heroes. You know, they're the ones that I'm in awe of their ability to play at the level that they can. But more importantly, I think I just look at how in the modern day and with all the pressures that there are around social media and how someone like him is in the public eye. Look at Rory McIlroy the other day, by the way. You know, like I I personally love the fact that he left the premises after he knew he wasn't winning because he couldn't. I could relate to that, and he's getting pasted for it on social media. You know, it's like how rude and obnoxious. But no, like that for me is like that's protecting your own mental health, and so I guess it hurt me to think that perhaps in Grayson Murray's case that the pressure got so much, and that the moment Joe, I think you and I actually talked about this the first time we spoke. I think you gave me an example of a young sportswoman or a person that you worked with who had been very open about struggles and then actually ended up taking her life. Am I right in saying that?
Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, do you want, I mean, I don't know if you want to share that
It was
story,
like
but I think, yeah.
there's been cases, and that's just as we try and people always ask you, why don't you do videos of interviewing people? Because here's the thing: is we talked about Grayson Murray. I knew someone who I did an interview, wasn't for Tammy, by the way, talking about their mental health and emotional well-being involving football. One of the homeless World Cup guys, and the girl ended up ending her life. But what happened was, at a point in time, she was in a very good place. She got all the support. She ended up changing her life around for a very positive way after being rock bottom. But again, trauma can come back again. Trauma can attack. Life circumstances can change, and where you were in a good place one day, you're in a bad place the next. And sadly, the young girl ended up ending her life. And I think if you look at sort of the Grayson Murray example, he's out openly, which is to be commended, talking about his mental health and emotional well-being, talking about his struggles. We don't know what support mechanism was put in place to get him into a better headspace, but then ultimately
No.
the end result is he's ended his life. And we have to basically try and put measures in place to make sure that we're always checking in, because if we there is no magic wand. Like I says, I look back at sort of my traumas and I know I've put mechanisms in place to deal with them. But here's the thing, I don't know what tomorrow holds or the next day holds. And I've got kids of my own, and I can resonate with my stepfather lost his biological child, and what would happen then. I can't comprehend or think about that, but I know I won't take it particularly well. But what I will be doing is trying to build the support network and not disengage from the support network. I think that's key, because we can all get to a good place, and then we could say, right, thank you very much and see you later. But we need to keep those people around us and supporting us and helping us, because, as I says, we can only do so much, and that's on a personal level and as a support level. But the more, from a support perspective, the more that I check in, the more that I sort of see how people are doing. I know what circumstances they're going through, but ultimately, like I says, life isn't fair sometimes, and we don't know what's down the line. So that's about trying to plan for it, but accepting that sort of things can change relatively dramatically sometimes.
So, golf and how you're using it and how you see it being the power of good that it can have in communities that you serve, for example. Talk a bit more about that.
Before COVID, sort of, we only ever had like toy golf clubs that we were using as part of sort of youth programs. But I think whenever COVID sort of struck, the one sport that you were allowed to play because it was outside was golf. And we also got the Portuguese weather to back it up, if you recall. It was the most beautiful weather system ever in the history of probably the United Kingdom when everybody was locked up in their house. But when they allowed you to go out and play golf, that's when I sort of took it up and found my passion for it. I'm not particularly good at it. I play off 28 in my society. They used to call me Trigger Woods. The very first time I ever played golf properly was the Sleeve Russell, and I only used the 5 wood and the putter. Because I had to borrow clubs and they didn't know how to use any irons, so they called me Trigger Woods. And then they called me, well, again, because I was only starting golf and I invested in some cheap stuff, which was Slazenger. She used to call me Jose Slazenger as well. So I've every sort of, I've got every bit of stick. I'm not in the TaylorMade now, sort of a more mature sort of golfer that wears TaylorMade stuff. But and like I says, unfortunately, sort of, I'm a goalkeeper and I got a bad injury. At the time, they thought it was trigger finger, but it turned out it was completely dislocated. And golf became sort of my go-to sport. And when we started to develop as a sport organisation that uses sport to promote mental health and emotional well-being, we were restricted by what we could and could not do. And I'd never played it, but when I got to play it, I got a sense of what it was about. And it was that whole being outside, walking, talking, learning, shoulder to shoulder, side by side. And it quickly resonated with me that we are sort of fundamentally built on. You've ever heard of the Take 5 Steps for Wellbeing? So the Take 5 Steps for Wellbeing is the biggest public health agency positive mental health campaign in Northern Ireland. And I think it's also within the wider UK. But there's 5 key steps in life that if you implement them, you can add 7 years to your life. You can have better mental health and emotional well-being. And they are: be active, golf, tick; connect, golf, tick; take notice of the world around us. You think about all the amazing golf courses you go to, the outside space, you're out with nature. So that's take notice, tick. Keep learning how to play golf. And when we do our value added sort of element where we teach mental health and emotional well-being, and then the final one's give. And we found that societies are so generous in terms of helping raise funds for mental health and emotional well-being. We had our volunteers who were given their time to go out and support sort of our projects as the guide men around the mental health sort of take, so we called it 9 Holes for Mental Health, was our national sort of mental health initiative where they guided people around and made sure that they were learning the mental health points. So one of our projects that developed on the back of COVID was we took, do you ever see the way golf sponsors would be displayed at each green? So each tee. We basically took golf sponsors and we put the 2 facts about mental health at each tee and a conversation starter. So conversation 1 was what makes you happy. Conversation 2, when you went to the second hole, was what makes you sad. Conversation 3 was what support services are out there. Conversation 4, how do you look after your mental health? But what you found was whenever 4 men were going around with our volunteers, we were working with a collaboration with men, getting older men who were isolated out of their house during COVID. Those conversations really sort of enticed a lot of emotion and a lot of sort of engagement from older men in particular who'd like use golf as a coping mechanism for that lost their waves, and the social outing that they had to look forward to every week was golf, and we were facilitating it, and they were learning about mental health and they were around through the facts and the conversations that they had. We weren't telling them the solution, so it was men talking to men about what support services, how they cope with their own mental health, and it inspires sort of someone to think, if you can do that, I can do that too. And that's sort of what we started to see. And then, unfortunately, because of COVID, you couldn't have the social situation afterwards. It all had to remain outside, but there was still a lot of sort of fun engagement and learning, and a lot of reflection. A lot of stories came through which sort of were quite heartbreaking about how, like, these are guys in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and the lives that they've lived, the impact that sort of COVID's had on them, the impact that we had on them by getting them out of the house and giving them something to look forward to and engaging with their friends. And then there's stories of loss and love and history, which then basically inspired a lot of our young volunteers who were helping out at the time to change their mindsets too, listening to people who had lived experience around how what they've been through and how sport, in this case golf, has been a key pivotal role in improving their well-being, enhancing their emotions, giving them something to look forward to, giving them purpose, giving them focus every week. And from then we realised that we were on to something. So obviously we were coming out the tail end of COVID. We replicated the programme with young people. And again, we had great success working in collaboration with a number of local schools. Always kept at 9 holes for the very simple reason is you could deliver a programme within a 2 hour period. And the course that we were using was it's quite a wee tight course, so you can do it within 2 hours relatively easy. But again, the message of being outside, because if you recall 2021, sort of the tail end of COVID, there were still some restrictions in place and they were advocating about doing things outside rather than inside. So we sort of, let's build on the program we did with the men shed, so the older group, let's replicate it with young people. And again, fun, engagement. Those guys really took the quiz element serious, trying to remember the facts and the figures, and it was a more robust competition. But again, what we found was we were getting young boys and young girls at this stage, because we're working with two schools, to talk about mental health and emotional well-being. We brought a golf pro in this time who was actually teaching the kids how to play golf as he went round. And again, amazing engagement, amazing conversations. None of these kids could basically swing a club, so the Cliftonville got wrecked that day. But we learnt again about how to use the power of sport in a very simple format. All we were using was sponsor signs, as we call them, with facts, figures, and conversation pieces. Our volunteers were basically making sure the conversations and the learning was being facilitated. And then at the end, we had the quiz where if you got all your questions right, you got to tuck off your score. We give out medals and trophies. And from then, we realised again that golf, again, it's a shared sport in Northern Ireland. It's not sort of bespoke to one community or another. The golf course that we were using was based on an interface, and we started to do cross community programs, bringing people from both the main Northern Ireland communities together to play golf. And we started to educate about sort of good relations, the common purpose, the common goals, what makes us the same, what makes us different. And all those conversations were facilitated again as we guided people around 9 holes for mental health and emotional well-being. And it's now become, as a result of that, a very established program. And I'm currently in the process now of designing an online stroke manual delivery sort of based workshop based on, we're going to call it Put Your Problems Aside and Drive Forward, but we're trying to basically get a bit more of a shorter title, but that'll be the strap line. And it's about educating them, and it's about trying to get golf clubs to come on board the way our football teams and our Gaelic clubs and our hockey teams come on board, and create something for them that ideally will be led by the club pro. And again, the reason for that is because most mental health organisations and that, we can't always be there. We can go in and do a workshop, but when we leave, the evidence would suggest that 8 weeks later people forget. But if we can give what we call a lightly sustained approach, where we give a bit of education, we back it up by resources, and we give them sort of the games that we've delivered around golf, which is our mental wealth games. We've got 4 games that choose golf tools. So one of them, I'll give you a very simple example for visualization. You've heard of the buckets of self-care, right? So fill your bucket. So we just get the wee sort of light golf balls, the wee easy ones, the big massive indoor golf clubs, and we say, right, those balls represent how you look after your mental health and emotional well-being. We talk about reflecting what self-care is. Young people tell us, and then very easily we just get buckets and go, right, try and hit those balls into the buckets and fill your bucket with self-care. You've got 5 minutes and you've had a bit of fun, you've had an interaction, you've had a conversation, and you've played a game around mental health and emotional well-being, which is kids hitting wee light golf balls with the big massive golf clubs, the indoor ones, in the buckets, which represents buckets of self-care, action, reflection, and at the end you give them some resources to reinforce it. And we've got a couple of games that we will give to the golf clubs with the tools, and we're just going to make it available to them because we believe that we've got the track record with other sports. Golf is you're part of a team, you're part of a club, you're part of society, and it's the same principles as, in my opinion, as a football team. It's that inclusion and that
Mm,
connection. And ultimately, if you have that in
mm,
place and you've got your golf club leading on mental health and emotional well-being, distributing the information, sharing it amongst members, it'll entice those conversations. It'll help with early intervention and prevention because people will know the services and support there. And that's where we're going with it. And ultimately, that's how we're using the power of golf to make a difference.
amazing. Something you said there about leaning into, say, PGA professionals or club professionals to, teaching professionals to help you run some of these things. What's really interesting about that, I think, Joe, is I just completed the community golf instructor training program, which has been rolled out and developed in collaboration between Golf Ireland, Golf Scotland, Golf Wales, Golf England, and the Golf Foundation, right? And what I found really interesting, well, not even just so much about doing the course itself, but the context in which that program has been developed is because it's, I think, perceived that there is in order to deliver the health and well-being benefits that golf can offer at scale, we can't depend on PGA professionals alone to help us achieve that. And I would argue, and I would like to imagine that you would probably agree with this, given what you've just said, is, and where I hope to be able to use that qualification now, is when you're talking about using golf in the context in which you're trying to use it. I would argue that human beings like you and I, who have got that lived experience of whether it's mental health, suicide, baby loss, unless a PGA professional has experienced that or actually has a level of empathy to be able to connect with the people they're delivering golf to, that is where the power comes in those people delivering the golf sessions with the lived experience to be able to deliver the power of golf, if you get what I'm saying. I have a segment in this podcast which is called Golf Yourself Nostalgic. I think you've answered it already. I mean, you've given some wonderful examples there of your own nostalgia about people that you've seen out in the golf course and what it means to them through what you do with Tammy. You've also said something which I'm going to go to in just a moment, which is called The Eagle Has Landed, because that is a segment where I like to ask my guests to relive a particular golf shot that they've hit, which they're really proud of. And I can, so just hold it for a sec, because I think you said something a minute ago about how some people play for points. I play for shots. I thought, right, well, if he said that, he's clearly got a shot in mind, or a few anyway. But just on the nostalgia piece, it just buckled me what you said about the whole Jose Slazenger. And just to share a little story with you on that. So you make me think about how, like, golf, talking about accessibility and inclusion in golf, like golf equipment, when you're, so you've made it to the TaylorMade League now, but TaylorMade is a great brand, make quality golf products, but it's not the cheapest out there. And my introduction into golf, I started at the same sort of level that you're talking about that you're at. I bought a full set of Wilson clubs. Wilson, like, they're nothing in the grand scheme of, like, the big brands or whatever. But I missed those set of clubs, Joe. They were like, it was everything in one bag for like a couple £100 or whatever. And I remember selling it on Gumtree or whatever it was, kind of thing. And a guy came to my flat to collect them. And I thought, I don't want to let these go because they've treated me so well and they're my introduction to the game. But what I thought was amazing was I was passing it on to a guy who had just got into his golf. And I thought, they're going to a good home and they're going into good hands and they're going to get good use out of them, Eagle Has Landed then. What's taught me through the shot, where you were, why it lives long in the memory?
So, the very first time I played golf was the Sleeve Russell, which is a PGA course. During COVID, sort of, my friends, and I'd played with plastic clubs, but this is the first time I've actually played properly with a society. And my friend lent me sort of a bag which had the 5-wood, a putter, and a pitching wedge. So that's only 3 clubs I had. And I'd never swung a club before, and this is like a very prestigious sort of club in Ireland, and they were all going, "Oh, he's going to go off the first tee box." There's about 20 people watching us, and they all hit their shots, and they went sort of about 150, 200 yards. And I only had a five, I didn't have a driver at the time, and off the tee, the very first shot, over 200 yards, and they were like, "Wow!" I didn't embarrass them. Now, further down the course, I hit the five wood, and the shot went forward, hit a divot, and landed behind me, which was a bit of a trick shot. That again, they were all laughing, but that was probably the best sort of under pressure with everybody watching you. It's such a prestigious course. Never sort of other than a few practice swings. It never lifted a proper golf club in the context of playing the game of golf. And I had a 200 yarder at Steve, just connected with a perfect. But there's a picture of me, and my legs are like bent in like that. The way I hit it was just completely comical, but I still managed to fully connect with it. And everybody always talks about the shot. I actually have, and you talk about nostalgia. I have a five wood mounted in my sort of garage bar with the picture of me with my bendy legs hitting it, because that was me getting into golf. And ironically, again, we were out for Father's Day playing golf. One of the guys who was with me in Sleeve Russell says, "You know what, Joe? I'm glad you stuck at it, because that was when we first seen you play." He says, "You've come on leaps and bounds. I'm still not scoring big, but I'm not destroying golf courses like I used to. I'm getting more better shots than bad ones. I'm just sort of three putting where I need to start getting the two putting to basically start getting points on the board." But I fell in love with golf. Like I says, Trigger Woods and Jose Schlesinger were my nicknames for the first 2 years, but they're starting to call me Joe now. So I'm getting respect on my name as in actually physically using it, and that putting sort of a pun behind it. But that's when I started golf, how I fell in love with golf, and it is such a nostalgic moment that I do have. I didn't sell it. It was cheap favorite, but I have it mounted, and it has Trigger Woods and a picture of me with the bendy knees swinging my very first one, because they went to take the pictures and the videos thinking it was going to be, they were going to mock me, but they ended up being, wow, 200 yards plus. Actually beat all their drivers. It must have been the first time I've ever got a fully perfect connection, but that's my nostalgic moment of when I officially fell in love with golf.
Absolutely love it. Brilliant. Such good stories. And these are probably the favourite parts of these podcasts that I love, because I can just relate to you totally, like on those stories you've told there, because I've been there too. Probably the last portion or segment of the podcast, Joe, is some people almost view it as a controversial segment, but I think it's meant in a humorous and also partly serious spirit as well, which is, I call it cut it out. So if there were any one thing about golf that just doesn't take your fancy, or something that you see in golf that grinds your gears a little bit, in the game or in the culture around the game or in clubs or whatever it is what would that be? One thing, if you could have your way, that you would take out of golf to make it better?
I thought, do you want me to tell you something? Actually, I've never thought of it, Chris. I know the handicap system, they've actually addressed it. I think it was issues around the handicap system. The guy play off 20 at my society, but I think next year we're going to properly accumulate it and get a proper score so we can play off proper scores so we have a chance of getting points on board. So I think it's been addressed. I think, again, well, I don't know, but I can't speak for England, Scotland, and Wales, but in Northern Ireland, I think a lot of clubs have accepted that membership goes beyond cost. One of the more prestigious clubs in Northern Ireland, Malone, which would be quite wealthy, has always been supportive of TAMHI in terms of donating four balls and anything you need, guys, will get on board, which to me would debunk a historical myth that these guys would look down and not support grassroots sort of organisations like ourselves. So there's been a lot of positive work around sort of golf clubs being more open to people from all walks of life coming to play. I actually quite like the dress code thing, a polo shirt. I don't think that should ever change. I like making a bit of an effort to look a bit smart to play golf. The fact that you wear baseball caps in the New Lodge, where I'm from, would basically not be worn by golfers. There's not much I would change, but I think we've discussed in this podcast is I think golf clubs as a whole, they start to embrace their true impact on mental health and they start to put more robust programs in place. You says about you did the trainer type course. If they start to look at sort of even beyond the PGA coaches, people within their club that could become mental health trainers, mental health advocates, mental health officers, and they start to look at themselves more as a team. I know golf is quite an individual sport, but you still go out with four people, 9 times out of 10 a four ball. If they start to look at themselves as a team and start to do more work around it, maybe it could add so much more value to a golf club. In terms of, because I know though, if you think about it yourself, would you want to be associated with a golf club that has a reasonable membership, that has a team-based environment, that creates a great social environment, that puts on lots of competitions, and fundamentally that promotes mental health and emotional well-being? I think it all lends itself to draw not only basically new membership, but if the draw investment, because again, we all fall into the debunked myth that all golf clubs are wealthy. They're not. I know from working with a lot of clubs in Northern Ireland, they have their own struggles, like because of the cost of living. People aren't eating out as much in them. They aren't going to the social elements in them anymore, and they could genuinely grow their membership and grow their programming through embracing mental health, because I don't think any funder could contest that a golf club does not champion the Take 5 Steps of Wellbeing, does not champion mental health and emotional wellbeing. The big focus at the moment is the big sort of buzzword is about the environment, sustainable goals around environmental development. Golf clubs are basically outdoors, the environment, their outdoor space, the green space, and they could benefit so much if they actually embrace it. So that would be my sort of not what it would change, but what it would add to the golf society, the golf programming, to make golf not better, but more open, more inclusive, and increased programming, which will fundamentally make a difference using the power of golf to shape, change, and save lives.
Yeah, brilliant. Joe, thank you. We're coming up the 18th. I think we're on the 18th green now. We're about to round this out. We're about to knock our final putts in and get into the clubhouse for our orange squash or whatever takes our fancy. But before we do that, do you have any final thoughts or final words you want to offer the listener?
Oh, well, Kris, first I want to thank you. I know before we agreed to do a podcast that you shared your personal story with me, and it's the one to be commended about how you're using the power of golf to basically shape, change, and ultimately save your life from the dark space of losing your baby. And I think sort of both of us sort of are symbols of how golf can be used for good, how golf can golf yourself healthy, as the podcast is called. But the advice to golf clubs is, look, I run an organisation called TAMHI, and if any golf club is genuinely interested in mental health and emotional well-being, no matter where you're based, what you do, we can make you a mental health toolkit with your golf logo to distribute to your members. We can get you on our apps. We'll send you information for mental health weeks coming up. All you do is circulate it amongst your membership and keep an eye on this space, because Kris, I would love, like I said, when I get the golf course designed, I'll send you it. I'm not precious about sort of, oh, this is mine. I want to give it to the golf community. I want the golf community to roll it out. I want it to make a fundamental difference to mental health and emotional well-being in golf and society. Like I said, I appreciate and I value that there's the 0.01%, and everybody will in the golf community will probably aspire to be that way. And that's your heroes, your Rory McIlroys, etc. But I believe that sort of golf can make a fundamental difference to the 99.9%. And those that are engaged in the environment, those that play golf regularly, those that play it recreationally, those that play it for competitions, those that play it to be with their friends, we can genuinely make a difference to the golf community. And I know sort of if you're learning and with your sort of ideas, Kris, I think there's an opportunity there too to explore about how we can help you help the golf community with your connections. So that's it. Just guys, golf's a powerful tool. Keep using it. We use it, and keep an eye on our space, and keep an eye on Kris's podcast and his materials, and let's basically put our problems aside and drive forward, Kris.
Love it. And I don't think you should change anything about that strapline. I think it's brilliant. We're all about embracing the rough and cherishing the fairway.
That's
Golf
it.
Yourself Healthy. Wordplay is A-OK at Golf Yourself Healthy. So I actively encourage it. Joe, been an absolute pleasure. And I'm looking forward to continuing the work together and the conversation.
Right, Kris. All right.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and feel inspired to go out there and continue to golf yourself healthy. Remember, if you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to follow the show on your preferred podcast platform and maybe also leave us a 5-star review wherever you feel it's merited. Also, you can head over to golfyourselfhealthy.com, where by filling in your contact details in the contact tab, you can sign up for future newsletters and updates. Until the next time, remember to always embrace the rough and forever cherish the fairway.